Hi there. Welcome to the latest episode 110. I am your host, Dr. Jenny Chen. Most venture funds shy away from Neurotech for its long time horizon and technical hurdles. But Varun Turlapati saw opportunity where others saw risk. As founder of Chanakya Capital, he's building a fund dedicated to Neurotech's transformative potential at the intersection of biology, AI, and engineering. In this episode, Warren shares his journey from being a software engineer to venture capitalist and reveals how he evaluates deep tech startups through rigorous deal flow, expert advisory, and precise risk triage. Tune in for a masterclass on deep tech investing, neurological innovation, and the mindset it takes to lead in a field reshaping how we understand the brain.
Please listen to the disclaimer at the end of this podcast.
Hello. Welcome to the pod. Today we have our very first venture capitalist to join the pod. So I'm really happy that we have someone who's from the investor side to talk to us. And his name is Varun Turlapati. He has a fund. The name is Chanakya Capital. Sorry, I'm trying Warren, as you know, but you probably can pronounce it better. So why don't you just start with telling us what this fund aims for?
Yeah, we are an early stage 2 million fund, and we invest in, again, early stage neurotech device startups. That's pretty much it. And when I say early stage, just to clarify, anywhere from pre-seed through Series A, and we can talk about why Series A still is early enough for us to get into. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's pretty much what we do.
Well, did you grow up wanting to be a venture capitalist?
No, I probably did not even hear of that term until 2015. For the first time is when I heard it. Until then, I thought maybe super rich people start their own companies and do something somehow, and or maybe they have like I don't know, like they're born into wealth or something, which is true for a lot of people. But I just did not know that this term exists, venture capital. I knew of stock market traders and those kind of stuff, derivatives maybe, but never venture capitalists until 2015. So yeah,
What happened in 2015?
yeah, we were listening. So okay, I was one of the earlier employees, engineers at a very early stage startup,
Hmm.
and one of the perks at that time, especially riding on the waves of like Facebook, Uber, and some of those things that were like beginning uh, to gain a lot of attention in the Silicon Valley, especially uh, startup perks were getting more and more creative, but one of the best ones for me always was the ability to hobnob with people
Hmm.
from different walks of life, especially in the venture space and startup space. So you get to hear from other founders and other early stage engineers, marketing folks, sales, and everything. And so the CEO of that company, Datos.io, was the company I was working at. That was my first early stage startup, by the way. Until then, I'd worked for a bigger company called Riverbed. And
Hmm.
so this CEO used to bring in, VCs, either our companies VCs or even other VCs in and around the sector of B2B SaaS, which is where we were at that time.
Hmm.
And so he used to do that, like lunch and learn Fridays, grab lunch, just listen to some of these subject matter experts come in and so on. And, mostly when it was the VCs, I would see how uh, perked up everybody was, like, catching on to every syllable they would utter. And it made me sit up and take notice. To me, in that naive view of pre 2015, where I didn't even know there was something called venture capital, maybe yeah, 2013 something maybe, let's say. But anyhow, I looked at how knowledgeable they seem, how much money they seem to have, right? Again, it took me a bit, yeah, so exactly. So it started with like, oh, this one person has money, power, and the magnetism to capture an entire audience. And I was like, well, I want to be like that. That's it. It was pretty much that. Of course, along the way, I learned, unlearned, relearned a whole lot about what venture capital is and so on.
Hmm.
But that
Yeah.
intrigue started then, and so I have that founder to thank, for those kind of sessions. And just the curious person I am, it to me seemed to be the best place to be to solve different kinds of problems. And so that's, not just engineering, but like what else? Oh, just because your product works well, it doesn't mean it'll get sold. You have to market it, you have to sell it, you have to do this, that. You have to think about valuation, acquisitions, a lot of those things. So I was like, yeah, I think this is a place that I eventually want to land to be truly not bored at any point in my life because I have so many different things to do, is how I viewed
Yeah,
it.
I agree. Some of the the best conversation I had were with investors or venture capitalists because they're so knowledgeable, have a broader vision about the field. And I think there's a lot of foresight on your previous CEO to actually facilitate this kind of cross-pollination of knowledge between engineering and business. It's really it's a lot of enrichment process for that.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
okay, you got inspired, but that was 2015. That was like more than a decade ago, and then you just started this fund. What happened between then and now?
Yeah. So 2015, it started the thought process. I felt grossly inadequate to do something like that. I
Hmm.
didn't have the money. Let's start with that, right? I still don't, but we learned that yeah, you can raise a fund, you can do some things and so on. But that took some learning. But that learning was not something I could do. I could afford. Um at or on the job, right? These are things I had to learn on the side, and nobody would take me seriously if I just ask more than a few questions, as insightful as they may be. The opportunities had to be made. Uh, the most important of the opportunities were to be in rooms where those discussions were happening in a more relevant manner.
Hmm.
Outside, as employees and engineers, we'd be like, "Oh, have you heard this news? Oh, have you seen this latest thing?" And that's it. But there was no insider information that I could get. Yeah, it happened after the fact. We kind of understand it. We kind of reverse engineer how that may have happened, but no real insight. So then how
Right.
do I get into these conversations? Do I have somebody in my network who can take me alongside with them? And I really hope that that would happen. Somebody would just take me under the wings and just go, introduce me to a bunch of folks over beer. Those are the kind of stories I heard, all like cinematic stuff, but happens only to very few people. But again, it has to be some sort of planned serendipity. And so that's what I started getting into. Like, how do I do this? How do I make this happen? Okay. Then I next said, okay, let's go to meetups where I am now talking to at least other founders, as aspiring founders, other engineers from other companies. And over a period of time, at least I started addressing what I felt was very technological gap in my resume. It was still
Hmm.
early mid stage at that time for me. And so I said, okay, well, let's improve. So for what's the first part that I need to talk and convey that I know things, that I should know things, right? I cannot just BS and just go very far with it. So I need to do that. So then let's learn some of these things.
Hmm.
How did I learn? There are different ways. I changed, switched companies, jobs, sectors, the product that I was working on, the programming language that I was using. So often, the jumps that I made from that point on were pretty aggressive. The moment I was feeling comfortable at a job, I pushed myself out. I said, this is it. And sure, I can become a manager and director and so on. Yes, eventually I wanted to get to those ranks as well. But there was a certain level of saturation that I would feel. And at that point, I said, no, 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 this is not what I want. I want to be uncomfortable in somewhere else and therefore learn some of those things and force myself to do different things. So that happened at the technological level first, then I go sector level as well, and then I got comfortable, and then it became very evident to me that no matter where I go, what I do, software is just a tool. Uh, the problem could be anything, and software is one of the tools that you could use to solve the problems. But the problem solving is the important
Hmm.
part. That needs to be clear, and then software can become a tool. You cannot just throw software at everything and hope that it'll solve some problem. So those were times where I started focusing on, okay, problem and solution, not just like, oh, I'll build this fancy tool and let's see what problem gets solved. That was also key because that's how VCs also want people to solve problems as well. And those are the best backed companies. Um, so I started building that up.
Hmm.
And, so that's how it took some time. I said I felt inadequate then. I still feel inadequate now, but, slightly better version of inadequate. And I said, okay, let's do it.
So when did you first write when did you write your first check, and what was that like? That experience?
It was thrilling. because that's the first time I remember not the first time, actually, I had already made investments into a VC fund. That was my friend's VC fund based out of Bangalore
Hmm.
in India. So I already had written a check at all. So it was not like the first ever investment in the VC space, but first angel check. So it's my own name directly getting onto the cap table. Yeah, that was felt very special, like seeing like preferred shares, and I was like, "Ooh, this is the first time." And I was like stiffening my collar, and my wife and I were like, "Oh, wow!" And my wife didn't even know what preferred versus common was, and all that stuff. And I had to explain to her like,
She
"This
probably
is what
doesn't
it is."
know what the hell is going on, so that
No,
allowed you to do that.
no, but actually, no, but actually, she knew the company. She's the one who brought this company. The company is
Okay.
Psionic.
Hmm.
She's the one that brought Psionic to me, saying like, "This is my ex lab partner at PhD, and like one of the things that they did intersected." My wife is PhD in neuroengineering, and that should probably
Oh,
give away why also we are very confident about neurotech as well. But anyway, and so that's how she knew. So even without Adil, the founder, pitching anything about Psionic, Joanna she pitched the technicality of it all. Like she said, this is what it is, this is how it works, and so on. Almost, almost stopping short of shut up and sign the check, right? And so she was a very influential person in that deal happening, by the way. So
hmm.
without that, my angel check could have gone maybe somewhere else. But the impact that Psionic has made so far, like even on other people's lives, is something that I'm really happy that I did that as my first check. But that
Yeah,
happened in
I regret. I
2021.
regret I did not write that check in 2021. I think you wrote that check, and
There you
I was
go.
presented with the opportunity actually probably even before 2021. Actually, I think I knew about them even in 2018, and I hesitated
Yeah,
because there were a lot of opportunities, like you said. How do you pick one
yeah.
out of hundreds of these? And also, you seem to be a risk taker. You don't like comfort too much. And but what were you expecting from these investments back then?
To make me money. So that,
So you didn't really want to make money.
of
But were
course.
you
Look,
expecting like were you because I knew 90% of angel checks, is basically going to go to zero, as you know, the stats.
yeah.
I mean, what were your mentality to say, how do I increase my odds of success in the face of this kind of unfavorable statistics?
Yeah. I I may have to go a little before sometime. I do not know when this happened. I I used to be somewhat of an analyzer, like analysis by
Hmm.
paralysis kind of a person.
Yeah.
Somewhere I broke it, like I don't recall when exactly along the way. Because one of the things that I do always is constantly question me, myself, my approach, my thought process. Am I doing well in my own standards or not? And so that not only on the professional front, but even personal front. Like, hey, I was like, I'm right now I'm learning Arabic as my seventh language, by the way. And so
Oh,
things like that,
wow.
right? And so
Arab is
I
very, very difficult. That's a very difficult language.
actually, I'll tell you what. Yeah, it's not that bad actually. Come to think of it,
Okay. Okay.
I think Mandarin actually was easy to learn as a language, except reading was hard. Like reading was
Yes.
hard because it's not additive. It's not like, oh, you remember a symbol and then you add some variant and then it sounds like it. No, it's not. Completely
So do you
different.
speak Mandarin? I
No,
can
I
I
used
can
to. I can introduce
Okay.
myself and I can barely say that I want to eat vegetarian food, no fish and those things. That's about it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
uh, but see, that's what. So the language learning is something that thrills me, and so now Arabic. And so generally, as a person, that's what I do. And so along the way, like I said, I broke that an analysis by paralysis approach that I used to have, or kind of compulsion that I felt like, oh, I have to go through all the stats first to make a decision. Then I started
Yeah.
understanding, like, look, things are going to have some sort of a risk. And at the end of the day, you have to dip yourself into it, which is what I did even with those job hops, right? Like, hey, I don't know that programming language, but hey, let's go in, use that as a forcing function because if I don't produce on the job, then I'll get fired. Like that kind of a thing, compelled me to go deeper into that kind of risk taking territory. So I'd already done that a few times, not in the venture space, granted, but on the investment side, I did penny stocks sometimes. I did like this other thing. explore like options and so on. Eventually didn't do it because it needs capital at the end of the day. It's intensive and so on. But then slowly starting to take some of these risks. Some of them were validating. Some of them reinforced this thing like, yeah, you have to dip yourself into this. You have to be prepared to lose some money, even in the penny stocks. I think I invested in five, four of them crashed, but that one somehow magically doubled in a way that it made up for all of these. And I was like, it's not a bad thing. Yeah, sure, it didn't do me well, but hey, it could have gone worse. All five could have been lost, right? And so then, of course, I never invested in any other penny stock after that. Even better, I now know how to recognize something as of like, oh, this is a FOMO for like pump and dump kind of a thing. So those experiences built me as well, right? So I
Hmm.
understand like how to not just get into the sway of things. And so we see same thing like yeah, I mean statistics and so on. Then I started understanding how my friend does it. He was GP at Java Capital in Bangalore with just done the third fund. Same thing. I keep asking him like, how do you measure this? How do you see this? Same thing. It helped me to understand his perspective as well. And at the end of the day, even now with this fund, even the starting it, the doing it enabled a whole lot more things to follow. Without that, I could have been stuck in this like, what's my thesis going to be? How do I perfect this? How do I do this? That iteration is the more important thing, and that's how I said, yeah, this is a we have to just start.
Just ship it. That's what
Yeah,
it
just ship
is.
it. Yeah, yeah.
I think you're kind of opposite of compulsion. If anything, you mentioned that you were compulsively analyzing, but that's the opposite of compulsion because that means you very non-compulsively making decisions, in a way. I just want to mention a little paradox.
How so? I'm not following.
Well, you're not, so I make compulsive investments for sure. I don't do enough analysis a lot of times, and that's compulsion. But you seem to be actually
Oh,
over analyzing. You know what I
I
mean?
see. No, but
Yeah,
I think may want to draw a distinction there. I think it could be going a little into the impulsive side is probably what you meant. But what I meant was like this OCD of over analysis is like
yeah.
that's where the word compulsion I use. Like it's like, oh, I have to first analyze everything before I get into it, sort of a thing. And that is something I broke, is all I meant to say.
But that could be your superpower. I mean,
Yeah, I think so.
you're in software. You were in software for a majority of your career, and now you're pivoting into a almost entirely different space. Now, granted, you are very in close proximity to neuroscience people, but that's not your career. And so, how does that background help you to form your current fund, which is focusing exclusively in neurotech?
Yeah, similar principles. You're right, absolutely. So uh, creating incremental value and showing progress and momentum far outweighs anything else, right? Then you're kind of resigning to fate, chance, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And there is always that element of fate and chance and risk and all of those things. But the way I think about this is, look, even for somebody like me who's now not afraid of jumping into the deep end of the pool,
Hmm.
the way to do it, and this is how I had done it before as well, um, is look, yes, do that. And your best case is, of course, you'll survive and learn swimming and so on, and you will not have any fear, etc., etc. Great. But just before you jump in, how about just take a look and see if there's a lifeguard around, just in case? How about also looking and seeing where's the nearest stairs for you, so that like you can then tell yourself, oh, I'm drowning, oh, I'm panicking, but all I need to do is paddle 5 times, get to the nearest stairs, and then I have something to grab onto, right? So, and then is there another person just to see, just in case somebody needs to be called, right? These are all you need to do before you jump in. The jumping in you still have to do, but don't just jump in without any other support system. That will just save you, right? Otherwise, then you're again going back to fate and all those kind of things. So that's what I have been trying to do, right?
Hmm.
So that together with these micro iterations of things, like just make some progress, keep going. It also gives you time to backtrack and go another route if you're constantly giving this feedback loop for yourself. And so even with the Neurotech fund, two things aligned there. One, look, I applied for jobs at VC firms. even early stage, like literally. So after close to 2 decades of being in some sort of leadership positions and being on path for like director, VP level roles, uh, I was happy to apply for unpaid internships at VC organizations. And then I got rejected left, right, center. No idea why. And then I said, well, you know what? Maybe let's get into a fellowship program where they may help accelerate and help me launch my VC fund. And
Hmm.
so I applied to a couple of them. I got through both of them. And then I had to decide. I think VC Lab embodied a lot of the principles that I was looking for generally as a person. Like, hey, these are the kind of things that I want to do. These are how I want to do things. The Mensarius oath to be ethical and so on was something that was refreshing. I was like, yeah, that's good. I like a firm that is launching VCs not at all costs, but like with some ethics, some
Hmm.
grounding principles, and so on. So I started that, and soon enough, even within that, there were like these iterations that we needed to do. Like, hey, this week let's get your thesis perfected. So you want to be able to speak about the fund and not bore people to death and things like that, right? Like one liner. And so all of that happened, and I was seeing that I was making progress. I was seeing that when I was overwhelmed by some of the fellow cohort members who joined alongside me, it was about 2,000 odd people who joined with me on that first day. And by the end of it, I think I was one of five VC firms to have launched from that 2,000 big cohort, right? And I still am one of the top performers, and I
It
get
was
celebrated by
2025
VC.
cohort. It was a 2025 cohort, or which year was that?
Last year this time exactly, I was in that cohort.
Okay.
And so so we are 1 year old, by the way, at this point. So just letting you know. And so yeah, that reminds me, I need to send out invitations for a annual meeting for all the stakeholders. But yeah, so going through that, it became clear to me that when I'm taking some feedback, I'm moving forward, I'm actually making more progress seemingly than some of the folks who have come with like a decade of VC experience, and meaning they've been in the VC firms, maybe working in some jobs or something, and have fundraised, et cetera, and yet here they are not able to let go of some egoistic statistics which are not necessarily adding to their thesis or something like that, right? But I
Hmm.
didn't have any such issues. I was like getting straight to the point of like, okay, this is not working. Okay, fine, let's throw it out. Let's bring this in. No ego. That helped me would be quickly be able to launch. And
Yeah.
then we also were able to accept funding into the fund, into the fund, and then deploy on the go as well. So I know there are a lot of capital call structures and so on. We again through VC Lab, there's this nice little structure where we are able to raise a little and deploy, raise and deploy. That worked magically for me particularly, because I was hoping for something like that, and that came and fell in my lap. So again, it's trying to make these odds better and better over time with the risk taking, and then
Yeah.
this having come along really helped me do exactly how I ship software. That iterate, and so now soon enough, by 10 months, we had four portfolio companies, right? And
Hmm.
now we have, like I said, eight strong companies out of the 80 in our pipeline, eight very strong ones. We are able to write checks for up to four companies even at this point. If I don't raise any more capital right from this minute, we can still do four companies. And so
That's
that
great.
iteration is pretty, yeah, and especially in times like these, where it's still
Yeah.
uncertain, volatile,
That's
and
interesting. This rolling fundraising platform that you're using is interesting. But let's go back a little bit of the fund, the capital, the Chanakya Capital. Um, I mean, I think you, as a fund creator, you're basically entrepreneur, just like
yes,
all the startup founders in a way. How did you now this name that I'm having challenge to pronounce?
okay.
Who is this person? Is that your family?
No, actually, it's the name of an ancient Indian philosopher, economist, and strategician. He wrote a book. He wrote probably many books, but one of the famous ones is called Arthashastra, which translates to the science and technique of money and wealth. And he was
Mm.
the emperor's advisor. This was in 300 BC,
Oh
for one
wow.
of the biggest empires in India at that time. And so he wrote books on how to treat people, how to make money, and how to gain more influence, etc., etc. And so that I felt was very appropriate, because I wanted to name it for I wanted to have a unique name first of all, but also something
Yeah.
that meant well, right? And so I tend to get drawn to some of these historical references. So people ask me about it and so on. So I thought, why not do all of that together? I didn't quite anticipate that the pronunciation is going to be that much of a challenge. Not just you, like everybody, but I'm like, hey, it's okay. I'll use that as a teaching opportunity as well. So it's Chanakya Capital.
No, I love it. It's very unique, and I know I was asking you. It's a bit of a joke because I already know that you told me what that is, and I actually added his book because a fascinating individual with lots of wisdom to learn from. I'm
Yeah.
not missing that. I mean,
Yeah.
this is very similar to Confucius and Lao
Yes.
Tzu.
Yeah.
All these philosophers from thousands of years ago. They can teach us a lot. So
Correct.
this is a great name. I love it.
Yeah.
Now
Thank
let's
you.
go to neurotech. Obviously, you already know about this field for a while, but I don't think a lot of listeners really understand what this includes.
Yeah, so let's get the most obvious things out of the way. Many people who can guess what it might be would guess one of two things. One is BCI, brain computer interface. That's the obvious
Hmm.
one. And of course, a lot of glamorous research gets published. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's the popular poster child at this point. Um, the uh, the other things that tend to be obvious is like, oh, neuro, so must be something related to the mind. Yes, also, so
Hmm.
therefore brain also. So you can talk about neurological diseases and disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, motor neuron diseases, stroke, uh, even retinal disorders, like again optic nerve and so on. So all of these are nerves essentially, right? There
Hmm.
is a command and control center. One of the ways that okay, maybe I'll put that dramatic story for off for just a bit. But so all of these are within the space that we are interested in.
Hmm.
And again, all of these are still obvious, I would say. The non
Okay.
obvious ones are still part of our thesis, which is any technology that you use, which is grounded in neuroscience and biology, to treat, manage diseases, or augment our abilities is still part of our thesis. So, what that means is, say, bioelectronics, specifically neuromodulation, neurostimulation. So, you have the entire nervous system of the human body. That's the command and control infrastructure, essentially. And so, these are there are nerves in the heart, there are nerves in your gut, and so no, we're not kidding when we say we are what we eat, because yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. So you if you have uh, a GI disease or a disorder or a malfunction, metabolic malfunction, there is currently research going on which shows that they're all linked eventually to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. This is the early onset. This is the earliest indication of where these start. We assume Alzheimer's is here. Yes, the manifestation, the symptoms are here, but where is the food going, right? It's going from the gut and all the way through these nervous system, blood vessels, so on, so forth. So it's a very intricate thing. And what we have been doing is trivially chop up sectors and areas
Hmm.
without paying full attention to the fact that we are completely intricately linked to everything in our body, right?
Yeah.
And everything in our body is in function of the brain at the end of the day. And here's where I was going to say the dramatic thing. Somebody recently asked me to do a reverse pitch, about my fund, and I only started with like two slides, which took 2 minutes. All I was doing was just narrating and asking people to follow along. I said, just close your eyes. Imagine that you are naked in the middle of Sahara Desert, middle of the Sahara Desert, with no shelter around, no food in sight, no water in sight, what do you think will happen? And I just played through that. Like, just walk through. Are you feeling thirsty? Do you close your eyes and you imagine you start feeling it? You're like, the skin is burning now, and so on and so forth. And then fast forward, the last thing, actually, so the last thing, if you can imagine, as you are dying, the lights are going out, you're fading, and you suddenly see like a glistening of maybe some water, I would bet that you would get out all the adrenaline to get and go to there and to try to rescue yourself. As a last resort, everything is given up. The last thing to die would still be your brain. That's how powerful it is, and that's how I guess uh, that's how self-preserving it is. And for that kind of an important piece of our body, it is the least understood part of our body, I would say, right? Now, we know a lot more about deep space mining and oceans and subatomic particles, supernovas and galaxies, but this is something we don't know. Ironically, is what I feel. And so again, bringing it back to all of that means that anything in our body can still be neurotech, so long as the tapping is through the infrastructure that I talked about, which is nerves, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, spinal column, the brain itself, and things like that. So that's how we can actually um, tackle even things like GI diseases, inflammatory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and so on. So everything is neurotech for us.
Okay,
Can
that
be
sounds good.
neurotech.
That's like everything can be 3D printed from my perspective. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yes.
No, neurotech is definitely, it may sound like niche, but I actually think I agree with you. It basically touches upon everything. It depends
Correct.
on what kind of lens you're looking at the world
Right.
through. So, if you're thinking about 3D printing all the time, you can think about how to print everything, but obviously from you is what can neurotech help in
Correct.
various disease verticals. So it sounds like you don't have any problem with the pipeline for deal flow. Um, you have 80 something companies that you could potentially going in, but that's a lot of deals to look into. What is the funnel process for you to decide on eventually who to put investment into?
Yeah, so initially there was a little bit of like this paralysis by like, oh my God, this sounds very interesting, this sounds very interesting, and so on. Over a period of time, which now is about a year, we were able to also get insights from other VCs, other founders on the challenges they run into typically, and so on. So, it's a constant learning process. Uh, we have some sort of like instinct at this point to say, well, yeah, this is interesting, but not investable, right?
Mhm.
There's a key distinction there. And in some cases, they're boring and unglamorous, but they are very investable. Something that affects maybe diabetes and a neurotech, or cardiovascular failure and a neurotech would arguably have a big market potential, right? And so it may seem like, it's not controlling a drone with my thoughts. Okay, yes, but it's preserving your heart, right? And so that's
Mhm.
also kind of important. Let's just not kid ourselves. And so that's the way we've been viewing it. So we've been able to discern and decouple what seems interesting with what is investable, right? And sometimes, of course, the best ones are the ones which are overlapping. We both have both of these. And then comes the other part, which is the execution, right? So just because there's something interesting, it doesn't mean the founders may be able to pull it off. So we need to look at the credentials and what have they done, what are they doing, how passionate are they, how involved are they with the problem space, and so on. And so out of the pipeline, we have now a sense for like how do we triage these companies, right? There are overplayed markets, so it's like, okay, small differentiator, no. So we often surprise founders when we say, out of class two, for example, we would prefer not 510K, right? Meaning like there's already a predicate existing and you're building something differentiated, and that's not good for us because we want to make sure that there is a significant technological moat and a difference and a disruptor. And so that's how we have started again, like triaging a bunch of things. There are some where they play in markets where there's no existing humane solution. Like
Mhm.
Alzheimer's, with all the research, it's still the one of the harder ones that they don't have a ready solution. And then yet there are families suffering there, like grandson not being recognized by a grandfather, something like that, right? And so, or a sole bread earner mother just realized that she has early onset of Alzheimer's, and now what, right? So at the age of 40, for example. So now
Yeah,
what? And so these are problems that need solutions. And so government, the regulatory bodies, in recognizing the importance of these, in some cases grant the companies what is called breakthrough device designation, or when they
right.
develop a device, they give them the investigational device exemption, which means like, hey, there's a recognition that otherwise the standard of care is non-existing or very poor. You can try something provided you don't just explode and just kill the person or something. Try it and show us some basic safety data, and then you can go, get in front of people and get them to try the device and show efficacy. So these are things that we look at as well. So that's how we are able to narrow down to what we feel are strong players. And then there is the other magical ingredient sometimes that we have to also look at how much traction do they have in fundraising. Um,
Hmm.
we don't want to be the only investors, not because we are afraid of being alone, no, but because if it doesn't make if it doesn't push the needle forward meaningfully for that company, for that fundraise, is pointless. The company will eventually not work. Now, if the technology is very compelling, we can write the memo and say, here's the memo, take it to whoever else. And not everybody is deep in their diligence on the scientific side, especially, and the
Right.
neuro-specific side. And so, if we are able to facilitate that, we do that for very promising and interesting companies. So, yeah, it's a mishmash of a bunch of things, but we've slowly started to get to this triage ability. And then we have a team of scientists. They all come with a PhD in some field or the other, like neuroscience, chemistry, material science. All of these are essential ingredients into neuro. It's not like a one single field, right? And so that's pretty important. We have a couple of doctors in our ranks as well who do diligence. So we come together, we understand things. And now recently we signed on Dr. Grant as our advisor. He's the chair of neurosurgery at Duke. He's a neurosurgeon, especially pediatric neurosurgery across the world. He's flown in to do cases, emergency cases.
Mhm.
So if he says he looks at a neurosurgical tool and says, yeah, it is good, it is doable, I am not investing in that because I want him to say, oh my God, where was this all this while? Right? And that's a clear way I can leverage his one word or one sentence feedback. And that's a game changer for us. And of course, Joanna,
Mhm.
as a fund advisor right from the beginning, also, in case you didn't know, she's also my wife. So it makes it so much more easier.
Now I know.
That's how she was able to come up to me and also say, shut up and sign this check for Psionic. Uh, and things
Which
like
was
that.
correct. Always listen to your wife. Tell
Yeah,
you.
there you go. There you go. And that's why my advice for anyone is have marry a significantly smarter spouse, right?
So you don't have to
And
work as hard.
correct. Yes, and that's the only thing that I've done so far.
Well, so you said you already picked a couple of startups that, I mean, one you already invested in Psionic, which I always also did recently, at a much higher valuation, painfully. But what are the other? I mean, you can tell us about Psionic a little bit, but also, what are the other startups you invested in so
Yeah,
far?
so Psionic is basically a neuroprosthetics company, which intersects just by virtue of being neuro and prosthetics, intersects with BCI and AI. Again, pretty easy to figure that out, discern that. The way they've designed it is very uh, strongly, which is uh, to make sure that they've trained it on real human data, which is not something that most robotics companies have. So they've gone about it the human way, and now they have enough moat there to then use that data to train robots versus
Hmm.
reverse engineering all these movements and then like custom fitting them into robots and so on. So that's one of the significant modes they have. Of course, there are a lot more for robotics companies that are coming into the picture, but again, this is something where they maintain a sizable advantage. The design is also pretty engineering standard compliant, meaning even software engineering, you have these standards that you need to fit in. Think like a USB-C, like that's a standard connector now, right? And so that there are protocols that go into how to make that work across all devices and so on. So similarly, they have designed their hand with this, open standards, and we saw some of those early on. Now, with that, when I was writing that check, I still was skeptical about this one thing, which when I looked up the market, prosthetics is like a 4 billion market. So just by itself, it was not a huge market. One,
Hmm.
two,
Right.
in all positive thinking, I actually don't want the prosthetics market to grow at all.
Right.
Right? In theory, I want the prosthetics market to be zero, like
Right.
not needing to do that. But it won't. Of course, there's a market, but we don't want that to grow. That's really bad. Something bad is happening there.
Yeah.
So then, why is this investable? So I asked myself the question. I asked Adil the question, and he said, "No, well, we are also looking at industrial robotics applications and so on. And remember, we talked about how cleanly we design these interfaces so it can work with humans as well as robots." I'm like, Ooh, okay, then that was enough for me. I joined the dots and I said, okay, well, in that case, it's a strong market. And so
Right.
when we look at portfolio companies, we also want to look at such intersections, not always with industrial, but like something neuro, and then, like I said, diabetes, neuro and cancer, maybe neuro and something else like the surgical
Mm-hmm.
tool. So when
Yeah.
we look at these intersections, we have better mitigation, we have a better chance to pivot, and at early stage, that's the best you can do. Just be ready to pivot, sort of a thing. Then the other companies in our portfolio, one is a wearable device.
Mm-hmm.
All are clinical, by the way, clinical applications. We are not investing in consumer space, although the technology is solid enough that they can still do a consumer variant or version of it. But we are
Mm-hmm.
looking primarily for the non-consumer side, like meaning the clinical grade side, meaning FDA approval and so on.
Yeah.
And so the first one was neuro EM, Alzheimer's play, treating Alzheimer's essentially. Again, hand waving it. I'm not trying to be technically accurate here, but yeah, Alzheimer's, everybody knows now there's the amyloid beta and the tau proteins. Just breaking it down and flushing it in some capacity, some way is has shown uh, to be efficacious to slow
Mm-hmm.
down Alzheimer's first, let's say.
Right.
Then treating and then reversal is the next thing altogether. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is ADHD, autism wearable again.
Oh,
What
tell me
I
about that.
really, yeah, what I really like about this, the company name is called PigPug Health,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, the story here that is very inspiring is the founder, Vitali, a very gem of a guy. He narrates his personal story and he says, look, I am on the spectrum of ADHD and autism myself. And as a kid, I had these traumatic stories. And even now, by the way, so the other day I just shared an image with him, not knowing that there was going to be a trigger response. A child with like some wet electrodes placed, and he was just not able to take it. He's like, no, no, just take it out. And so I was like, okay, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize, and so on. But he
Mm-hmm.
used that experience, the traumatic experience that he had,
Wow.
knowing that his parents were not trying to hurt him, but
Right.
they were just there to try to help this child. So how? Because we need to know what's going on. So they were plugging these wet electrodes to measure the brain activity, EEGs, and then see what the medication is doing, perhaps, and what the test scores are, and so on. But it was a
Mm-hmm.
very clunky setup. And so
Right.
Vitali said, nothing doing. I want to make sure that kids are not afraid of their doctors. Parents don't have to suffer their child crying and flailing. And also, let's not even ignore the fact that clinicians don't like children crying. Well, who likes to hear children
Nobody.
crying? Yeah. And
Yeah.
so exactly. And so nobody in their right minds would appreciate or be okay with it. So why not change the experience? So that's what Pigpug is doing. They have a configurable wearable like a headset. Just imagine this same thing, similar form
Mm-hmm.
factor with configurable electrodes, because we know, and it's a well researched area, neurofeedback is established as a practice and accepted as a practice. So clinicians are already doing that. Plasticity, the brain's plasticity, neuroplasticity is a known thing. Again, even more so for children 8 and below,
Right.
it's
Mm-hmm.
even more powerful to leverage that. And so by putting these configurable electrodes, one, you're measuring the brain activity when the child is performing tests, memory, attention, game, this, that. And so now the clinician is able to get this child psychiatrist or neurofeedback specialist is able to see how the brain is performing, actually doing signals, right? So objective biomarkers. Then it may not even be to replace pharmaceutical solutions, because for ADHD you still have to take some sort of medication, right? And so maybe it's not to completely get rid of it. Maybe it's not opposition of the pharmaceutical solution, but the practitioner now has real insightful data and can be non-empirical but very precise with the dosage and the medication, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore make sure that there is no such resistance to the dosage at this point, right? So you have to keep
Yeah.
on doing it. So this is
So
a very
new
powerful story.
biomarkers, basically. New biomarkers
No, EEG is
for
already established, right? So that
yeah.
is not, but providing this in a form factor that is real time shareable, and you don't have to lug the child to the clinic. The child is in the comfort of their own its own house, doing
Mm-hmm.
things, right? So and can move around. The content is also evolving, so it's not boring, same memory test like Vitali was recounting. Like he would be like, "Oh, I'm bored of this. I've already done this last week, right? So what else do I do?" But so now evolving tests giving different variants and flavors, keep the kids engaged. So the drop off is reduced. Once the drop off is
Hmm.
reduced, then there's a lot of solutions, a lot of things that can be done, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so this is why we like PigPug. And they're much earlier of the four companies that we've invested. They're much earlier in the stages, but that's an impactful one for me to make happen. And so, um, I often talk about who else might be interested in investing in that, or which neurofeedback practitioner or child psychiatrist may be interested in adopting that technology and working. So we've actually gone as far as even Australia and Dubai, and there are a few folks lined up saying, "Hey, ship us these devices and we use it."
Guess what? I have a friend who's a child psychiatrist in Walnut
Excellent,
Creek. So I'll
excellent.
hook you up.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And Vitaly would be super thrilled.
Yeah,
So that's the other one. And then we talked about Psionic already. Madison Scientific is another one. It's a game changer too. They're making a smart shunt for hydrocephalus patients.
hmm,
Hydrocephalus, for those who are not familiar with this, there's, our brain, our skull inside has brain, obviously, but there's also this cushioning liquid, which is not only for cushion, but it also circulates nutrients and takes out toxic elements that are produced, and it flushes it down the lymphatic system, basically lymphatic, but in the sleep and brain related terminology, it's called lymphatic, and it just drains it down the spine. So through
hmm,
cerebrospinal fluid. Simple mechanism, great, but in some cases that fluid starts building up in the brain, and so or in the I guess in the cranium, and so then therefore uh, it starts giving this headache sort of sensation,
right.
um, and then for a small percentage of population, if not intervened within a few hours, they may even die, especially early
Yeah.
stages in life. And so, for me, it didn't even have to be a massive market, but for the small market, the game changer here is one that they don't have to live with this fear of like, oh, I'm playing soccer here and I have this headache. I don't know if it's because I didn't drink enough water or if it's because of this. But now, uh, with the smart shunt, it helps assist in measuring the pressure every so often, and then help drain out only enough liquid to bring the pressure down to normal. Whereas the existing solutions are just dumb; they
Yeah.
just drain it
Why
out
why
completely.
don't right, exactly. I mean, I've looked at existing solutions as a neuroradiologist for decades, and why don't they create a smart shunt sensor to just, real time adjust? I don't understand.
That's
So, yeah,
Madison
I don't know.
Scientific right there. So
It's
that's
like
how.
it shouldn't
Well,
it's not science-fi. It's not sci-fi. It's actually very intuitive. Why didn't someone just invent that? So that's great to know it existed.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing. So the good part here is our neurosurgeon advisor, Dr. Grant, knows of this company. He said when he looked at it like few years ago, it was a little too big for his liking. But now the most recent one, they're making some solid progress, by the way, right? So we're very pumped up about two companies in our portfolio at this point, at least, like in terms of how close they are to potentially commercialize or
Exit.
exit even. Right?
Yeah.
Not to say the impact of all of these four companies.
Yeah, the space, first of all, the space that you're in so far, right? I'm not saying you're not going to go into digital health and that kind of thing, but you're basically in biotech and medtech. And you don't want 510K. You want the heart problems. You want to solve the heart problem. These, yes, they can make a lot of money, but the time duration is kind of unpredictable and it could be
Yeah.
very long. So how
Yeah.
do you address that concern to your LPs, for example?
Yeah, that does come up. So there are a few things that uh, can can be missed, right? So at a broad stroke, yes, all of these take time, but note that the kind of companies that we're looking for have a deep tech moat. What I mean by that is this. So I think all of these four companies, at least three of them, have had
Hmm.
significant number of years of university incubation. The
I
research
see.
has come through some of that. So let's take Psionic. Something around 2012, 13 is when they were incorporated, maybe 14, I forget. The research started in 2012. That's how Joanna knows, my other advisor knows Adil, right?
Hmm.
And so it started then, right? So from a company's point of view, it is 14 years. From my angel investment point of view, it's only been 5 years. And
Right.
from the fund, it has only been a year. Oh, so I'm sorry, not even a year. This is like we invested in September, right? So yeah, it's like few months. right?
Less than
Uh,
6 months.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And so let's say it even takes another 5 years for some sort of exit, right? Because again, of the strong intersection with industrial robotics, there's a chance to do that very
I
well
love
with.
it. I'm so excited for the future of this company. Yeah.
And so let's say five. For the company, it would have still been close to 20 years, 21 years, right? But for an angel investor like me, it was 10 years. And for the fund, it was just 5 years. That's not a bad thing. Same thing. You look at Madison Scientific, for example. They've been
Hmm.
there since 2018, I believe,
Hmm.
university funded research. But this is the part that people mm, don't see. And this is the part that I explain to them, and it makes sense to them. Because on the other hand, Jenny, you and I, we can say at the end of this podcast, we're like, hey, you know what? We have a digital health product that we can start, we can launch. Guess what? It's software play. AI is commoditized already. We
Yep.
can literally start with like a 20,000 investment between ourselves. Maybe okay, fine, maybe 50,000. Get the infrastructure cost. We can get a startup up and running, and we can get some trial like a prototype working and so on. The barrier to entry is low, is can work both ways. It is also because the barrier to entry is so low, anyone can start. My cat and my dog can start a company now, right? So then, is it truly an advantage to then not be in the deep tech space? It's not, in my opinion. Actually, this is better because we can go unrushed into these opportunities, wet out the deep technology, see the evidence that like yeah, psionics since 2012, neuro-EM since 2015, they've been there, right?
Yep.
And the eventual exit will, yes, be 20, maybe 15 years later. But from a typical VC early stage investment side, these companies have already had research grants coming in, NIH, NSF, local city grants, and so on. And they have incubation spaces often for free or like for some very nominal fee. So they leverage all of that. And the cost to fundraise is not as high when they come out to first raise from VCs or angels. That is something that is not very obvious to people, and that's what I explained to them.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And now I'm also seeing quite a few companies as, after 10 years of sometimes European commissioner funding or
Yeah.
university non-diluting funding. And almost I feel like that's one of the de-risk things I should look at as a filter for
Yes.
these deep tech companies.
Yeah.
Now we have only 10 minutes left for this podcast, and I feel like we have a longer conversation to really finish everything. But I don't want to miss this. So I'm going to move on to the next category of conversation is about your vision for the field. Um, what do you think the direction? This year in JP Morgan, for whatever reason, neurotech suddenly is like the thing. I don't know. It's like what just changed. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like we didn't have Alzheimer last year. Why did suddenly things changed this year? So I'd love to just hear about your thought on what the trend of the technology is going at and also the funding landscape.
To speak about that, I think I want to bring up another analogy, not very far in the past. So, if you talked about AI in the years 2016 through 2018, 19, maybe even 2020, you would often hear like, oh yeah, it's going on some research. Oh, this framework, this library is not going well. This software is not so good, and so on. But it seemed very research. It didn't seem like
Hmm.
it was very something actionable. And then what happened in 2022? Not only did AI become easily accessible, but now 2025 everything is AI because AI is commoditized. And so the switch and the transition happened so quick, people didn't even realize. But now is AI, pure AI, or some of these things the best way to invest? No. The best money was made by those who invested in AI in the years 2016, 2018, maybe even before, and then at 2022, they see this huge value. Nvidia, for example, anyone invested in Nvidia pre to post, oh, huge. Now you go and start clamoring for Nvidia stocks, you're not going to make so much of returns. I think Neurotech is exactly that for us. Because again, note just by what you said, even at JPM, previous years there were probably murmurs. Maybe the term was not even official at that time, right? And so these take time to build. But once it's built, two things can happen. One, everybody starts understanding this and they want to get in. Now, the good part here for VCs like me is that there is a deterrent. The barrier is higher. So either these are going to be just follow-on VCs who are like, hey, you know what? Out of our portfolio, we invest in all these sectors and we'll do this some portion into neurotech, and they have to follow somebody like us, right? But because we have that specialist focus, we can be exclusively on this and can enable things. But the way we see this is Neurotech will be more easily understood by people. And we, as a fund, are doing exactly that as well through our efforts. Not only are we fundraising by asking people, hey, come invest in this next disruptive technology, which not just for the disruption. I told you, right? Like this is all the
Yeah.
brain, everything about our
Yeah.
body can be touched by neurotech. Therefore, the market is everyone on this planet at this point, even animals. Let's not even just talk about
Whoever
8
has a
billion cows.
brain, that's yeah, whoever
Exactly,
has a brain.
exactly. And so it's like a huge, even for pet market. I
Yeah,
can see
whatever has
how.
a brain.
Right. And so with that, we'll be just ignoring something that is a huge market as an opportunity, as an investment opportunity, and the impact potential. And so I think we should take this more seriously. And for LPs, this is what I tell them. Like, yeah, this is where you want to be 3 to 5 years down the line. Almost everything is neurotech. That is probably not the best time to approach, or we will still find some important innovations, right? So it's always a case of advancing technology further and further and further. But by that time, more people will start knowing about this to get into this, right? Right now, the barrier is still high. So that's why we feel like we are in a good spot. And that's pretty much the pitch for Neurotech.
Yeah, there's
For
a
the,
first mover advantage for sure.
yeah.
Um, all right, we have like a couple of minutes left. I don't want to miss this portion, which is to get to know the human side of you, Warren.
Yeah.
Because beyond just being a venture capitalist, you have a lot of other interests, including regenerative farming, which is something I've never heard of until now. That probably says more about me than anything else. And also, you were on some nonprofit organization. Love to just hear a little bit about that.
I'm gonna plug in the battery. So yeah. So look, as a person, like I said, I take interest in a lot of things. So regenerative. So what I mean by that is, especially on the areas that I feel like I want to work and contribute, it's either through investment or working for a company, or heck, starting my own company, or putting together a not-for-profit, something or the other, where I can make some change, when I can make things happen. So if you look at it, the commonality is still there about the impact, right? Neurotech, everybody. Same with climate and farming. We eat food. If so, we need non-pesticide solutions, and non
Hmm.
solutions which are not destroying the land as we're trying to build this monocrop culture. So I got passionate. I read these things. I see how I can try to help instead of sitting at home and be like, oh, I wish there are solutions. I start understanding it with the idea that maybe I can solve it somehow. So at any given point, there are these threads. So I'm still very passionate about regenerative farming. I went and bought a piece of land in Arizona, 24 acres, and I someday hope to set up again with some partners who can also co-invest, set up some eco tourism meets regenerative farming stewardship kind of a concept where people
Yeah.
understand, they see it, and they see like, oh wow, this is why we should be not digging up soil. This is why we should completely get rid of the pesticides, for example, because it's a system. And so that essentially is it. Look at problems that inspire me, and to go find solutions. So regenerative farming is one of them. Not for profit, same thing. Like the impact, the idea there for Aquiles Institute, which is the not for profit institution I'm talking about. The idea is academicians stuck in academia,
Hmm.
researchers stuck there, not knowing that there is a world where they can bring their ideas to fruition. Industry, just as a regular company, maybe not even venture grade, but just get it out. And so that's the broad level mission of this Aquilus Institute, and that's why I'm happy to be part of it and to see how we can inspire people to take the next step in their work and not just abandon it and let the IP gather dust.
Yeah, well, if you need any farming hands, I could offer my help when you're ready set
Excellent.
up. And I'm also happy to help you with your other nonprofit goals because we actually have very similar goals as well, is to bridge the gap between academia to industry.
Nice.
Now, finally, what are your media digest habits that you think are good for founders, entrepreneurs, or investors?
Generally speaking, yeah, you want to learn as much as you can. Not everything you'll retain, but some things stick to you as interesting. Uh, you know, what moves some people is different from what moves other people. So take your pick. But in those fields, definitely keep learning because things are moving very fast these days. Like AI is just completely upending a lot of assumptions and processes. And so
Right.
that's one. But a meta level on that is founders who are specifically looking to AI to say, I want to solve the problem using AI. You also have to understand that, like I said, my cat and my dog can also do it now these days. And so, really, are you doing something so disruptive that nobody else has thought of? So, your moat is no longer going to be like, oh, I have a unique algorithm or, oh, I have data, like even data, like hundreds of people claim that they have data. Think beyond that. Your moat is going to be your execution speed. Your moat is going to be your partnerships, and you can definitely jump into the deep end of the pool, like I've done. But look out, keep an eye out for where your next lifeguard is, and so on and so forth, because the ride is going to get very bumpy. And just don't go in so blind that assuming that, oh, I'm the only one to think of this idea. So yeah.
This reminds me. Sorry. This reminds me of a famous quote from Harry Potter: "Constant vigilance."
So yes, yes. Yes, I think generally you do well to do keep that way, especially if you're a founder, right? Because you are at the risk-taking position. If you're a follower, then it's fine. But even then, I would say this is not the time to be a completely passive,
There's an art to follow
non-vigilant person.
as
Yeah,
well. It's not completely passive. Well, thank you so much for this interview, Warren. This is very insightful, and I will add your contact information if you're willing to share, or any other way that our audience can reach out to you for um, you know, to discuss any future investment or co-investment. I will share that information in our show notes, and I am certain we're going to have another conversation sometime in the future to further discuss neurotech. This is
yeah.
such an exciting field. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the insightful questions. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise, thank you. Bye bye.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views expressed do not constitute medical or financial advice. The technologies and procedures discussed may not be commercially available or suitable for every case. Always consult with a licensed professional.